Well, thank you very much. It's been a very interesting debate. It's very nice to be back at the Oxford Union. Apologies for being poorly dressed. I did have black tie when I was at Oxford, but it's more than 12 years ago now, and I tried on my black tie earlier, and it looks less like a dinner suit than a wetsuit. But notwithstanding my dress, I would like to tackle some of the things that have not been tackled, and answer some of the speeches that have already come from both sides, and to address what I think is an issue we have to take seriously, because it's about our future as a country and a society, and it's, in my opinion, not going to be easy, and it's going to require quite a lot of fairly clear, tough, frank thinking. Let me first of all give you some facts. We have to start this off from the facts. The 2011 census, which was published last year, showed that the number of people living in England and Wales who were born overseas rose by nearly 3 million in the last decade alone. Only 44.9% of London residents now tick the box saying that they are white British, and nearly 3 million people in England and Wales now live in households where not one adult speaks English as their main language. In 23 of London's 33 London boroughs, in 23 of those 33 London boroughs, people who identify themselves as white Britons are now in a minority. A spokesman, by the way, for the Office of National Statistics hailed that as diversity, but I can assure you that some of those boroughs are not diverse at all. On the matter of the rate of immigration, let's just clear up something. Nobody on my side, I certainly am not against immigration, and that is not what the motion is about, and you can reinvent it however much you want, but that's not what it's about. It's that there has been too much. And I would say, like I think other speakers have already said, that too much did not happen in the 50s, or the 60s, or the 70s, or the 80s. It happened under the Labour government in the 1990s and the early 2000s. There is a motif that this country has always been a nation of immigrants. That is not true. It is not true. For most of this country's history, there was a very homogeneous group of people on these islands. And the idea that what is happening now is what has always happened is simply a fib, and you have to look to this. The Huguenots are always given as an example, a very good example, and a group that 50,000 Huguenots came to this country in the period of the 1680s onwards. Now, 50,000 Huguenots over a period of years was equal to about 2 months of immigration in the 1990s. 50,000 was about 2 months. The Ugandan Asians expelled by Idi Amin, which this country, I think, rightly took in, numbered 30,000 people. 30,000 people by the late 1990s was 6 weeks of immigration. So my point to you, first of all, is that the speed and the rate matters, and it matters for a reason which I am going to come back to in a moment. But first, let me mention some of the arguments that have come up which do need answering about this. The first is the inevitable argument that the reason why we need mass immigration and have needed it is because there are jobs that British people will not do, and we need to import people to do those jobs. Let me say to you as frankly as it is possible to say, that is one of the most racist arguments you can hear. It suggests that there are jobs which British people not only don't want to do, but shouldn't do, don't have to do. We don't have to even encourage them to do. Please, you've had your go. We don't even need to encourage them to do. But we will go around the rest of the world and hoover up people who are willing to work for nothing because it provides us with cheap nannies and cheap waiters in restaurants and so on. I think it's a lamentable argument. The second argument you can hear, and we've had it already tonight, is the argument about the hoovering up, as I would put it, of the other end, as it were, of the economic spectrum, that it is the best idea possible that we will travel around the world and hoover up nurses and doctors in Africa and across other regions of the world, that we can take people from the third world who the third world has superbly educated and make sure they benefit us. Again, I think a lamentable argument. Look, the argument on immigration often comes down to net benefits. Is it an economic net benefit or an economic problem? You can, incidentally, on the material on this, find pretty much a 50-50 divide. About 50% of the studies say that there's a huge impact positively for the country. About the other 50% say the opposite. And by the way, that even goes, Lord Singh, to the study you cited. You cited the UCL study. That same study found that between 1995 and 2011, migrants in the UK received £95 billion more in services and benefits than they contributed in taxes. That's the same study that you cited. Another one that we get told, and we got it from someone on the floor, we need immigrants because they're going to pay our pensions. Ladies and gentlemen, whoever the gentleman is, let me tell you something, a shocking fact. Immigrants get old as well. An amazing fact. Which means that if you have that model, every single year you need to import more and more immigrants because you need to support that. It's known as the pyramid or migration model, and it doesn't work either.
Well, Douglas Murray is pretty much laying out the facts in the case for slowing down or curbing immigration at this debate at the Oxford Union. And look, folks, as Douglas was saying, he and other people on his side of the aisle, they're not saying that immigration needs to be stopped. They're not saying that immigration doesn't have some type of a positive impact on the country that we're talking about, Great Britain, or any other country for that matter. All that Douglas Murray is saying is that when you have that type of immigration flow, the type of numbers that are occurring, the same thing is happening right now, folks, in the United States of America on our southern border. We are getting tens of thousands of people every single day, and they're being shipped to all over. The only difference between England and the United States is that the vast nature of landmass that obviously we have in America. Now, the problem, although, here in the United States is that most of those illegals that are crossing the border are being shipped to the most congested cities that we already have. In other words, almost building up those type of, immigrant centers, so to speak, what they're calling sanctuary cities. That's happening in Leeds, in Birmingham, in London, in those places where immigrants from all different backgrounds, countries, ethnicities, heritage, creed, color, religion, all that are basically being, that's where they're going because either they have family members there from previous, illegal aliens, or family members that might have been here and now have got green cards or citizenship. So that's happening over here, and the same thing is occurring in Great Britain. And so where are the most of these illegals or even the legal migrants coming and going to? They're going to those areas that are already saturated with people from their own countries. They're not moving out of the countryside. They're not moving into the upper suburbs of London or the really nice areas. And then Douglas was talking about the fact that, it's not that they use the excuse that we need the migrants because British people aren't going to do some jobs. It's the same thing they say here in the United States of America. Very racist argument. Or the other thing, the brain drain. Oh, we're going to scoop up everybody from, that's got a great education, PhD, medical doctors, lawyers, engineers, and we're going to bring them over here and they're going to help the British people. Folks, that's just not how it works. You're just not going to be able to accumulate that many people out there. And then if you want to do something like that, that would be a way of doing it with meritocracy.
Yeah, and I'm just like, okay, so how does a 61-year-old guy run circles around guys like me in their mid-30s? Well, he's definitely not cheating with dangerous injections or pills. So what's his secret? I did some research and found out some scary stuff about the 5 feminizing foods he's always talking about. Turns out he's actually onto something. He says he's on a mission from God to stop what he calls America's soft man epidemic caused by these 5 feminizing foods. He's a Christian too, so it's not surprising that he found the best way to protect yourself against these feminizing foods, actually mentioned in the Bible. He says men over 40 especially need to avoid these feminizing foods like the plague and replace them with what he calls God's power foods. Here, let's just play the video and let him spell it out for you.
The Bible mentions one fruit from the Garden of Eden that can help men reclaim the tone and muscular body God gave them. So if you're over 40 and struggling with stubborn belly fat, love handles, and chest fat, I have some good news for you. You see, God created a man's body to be tough and powerful, to work hard, hunt down food, and even go to war to defend his country and the people he loves if he needs to. A man's body was not made to be soft, weak, and fat. That's why when a man simply eats the right foods, he'll look and feel powerful and strong, the way God made him. But the bad news is, most of the clean, whole foods God created for us have been modified, ultra-processed, and transformed into feminizing foods by greedy corporations. And no, this isn't some crazy conspiracy theory. Hard scientific data shows that there are 5 feminizing foods that increase estrogen, the lady hormone, and destroys a man's testosterone. These foods might look harmless, but they send a man's fat cells spiraling out of control, making him softer and weaker every time he eats these so-called health foods. But there's also good news. There are a handful of God's power foods still untouched by the sin of greed that can help any man over 40 undo the damage of these toxic feminizing foods. And eating these specific power foods can even help a man burn fat, rebuild rock-hard muscle, and reclaim the body he was designed to have. But we still have to deal with the 5 feminizing foods that are triggering a soft man epidemic in our country and destroying the lives of American men. That's why
To have a point system and say, here's what we sort of need. What do we need? Oh, we're short nurses. Okay, you know what? Let's take a look and on merit around the world. You need doctors, do the same thing, engineers, lawyers, teachers, whatever it is. But first, do it within your own country to find those people that can fill that position. When you find out that the amount of whatever job, let's say, situation is in peril, and you find out that this section of the economy does not have the labor force needed within the country, then look outward. Anyways, let's get back to Douglas at the Oxford Union as he continues his debate.
One of the strange things about having this debate is this. Everyone thinks that they have to tiptoe. I'm sure you're nervous about walking through the proposition lobby tonight. I'm sure you are, because this is an issue which is fervid and fetid in all sorts of ways. But one of the oddities about this is that there is complete political unanimity on this side of the House. Complete political unanimity. Jack Straw, who was one of the Labour ministers who presided over that catastrophic period of too fast immigration, now says, he said it in November of last year, that it was a spectacular mistake. That's his words, a spectacular mistake. David Miliband, now Labour leader, says that at the next general election... very easily done. Apologies. Ed Miliband, now Labour leader, says that if he wins the next general election, which he could, he will bring net immigration down because he realizes his party got this wrong. He said in September of last year, I want to get overall immigration down. David Cameron, Nadim's party leader, the man who would be properly Prime Minister perhaps in 2015, said in his speech last year, on 25th of March, he said, contra, Nadim, to your argument, quote, under the previous government, immigration was far too high and the system was badly out of control. Net migration needs to come down radically. That's the words of the Prime Minister. This is not an outrider argument. It's what all the main political parties now say. They say it because it's what the public think. 77% of the people in the British Social Attitudes poll last year said they wanted immigration to come down. Almost 60% said they wanted it to come down by a lot. That's the British people's opinion, and the politicians are simply, amazingly, having to try to answer that, and a serious need. Now, I'm aware that the bell has gone, but let me very quickly address the issue, if I can find it, that came up from a couple of people. And this is the key thing I really wanted to mention, if I may have a moment. This issue of our values. I hate hearing this, we don't know who we are, because quite often it leads to the thing of, we're not anything. Britain isn't anything, Britain never existed, it's not an identity, and so on. One of the reasons you hear that is because it is an attempt, I think an honest and a decent attempt by people to answer a real question. When you have migration at the rate this country has had it in recent years, you have to expand and water down your definition of what you are, because you have people coming in so fast that what would have been your definitions of yourself stop holding. If you asked somebody 50 years ago, what is Britishness? What are British values? They would have said it very clearly. They are epitomized in a set of historic institutions, in the institutions of Parliament, in the institutions of trial by jury and the high courts, in the great schools and universities. They would have said the monarchy. They would have said the Church of England. Why is it now that we have this big, endless debate? Who are we? What are we? It's because we want to welcome people, but it's happened so fast, we have to end up doing things like saying Britishness is about fair play or being nice to people. Everyone wants to be nice to people. Very few people would say our identity as a country is being mean to people. But we water it down because it's what we think we have to do, and in a way we're right. In a way we're right, because it has become very difficult to say what Britishness is or can be or should be for people when immigration happens at this kind of rate. I would submit, ladies and gentlemen, this is something which in your lifetime and mine is going to be a colossal issue. Migration does bring all sorts of benefits. When it comes at this sort of rate, I would argue it also brings some very negative things as well. And one of the things that is that people of this country, including many, many immigrants, and I'll finish on this, many immigrants, including first and second generation immigrants, now say there is a problem with the speed of immigration because it changes the country. It is all very well to say that we are open to people who share our values. But if our values water down and the people who come here come at the rate they have, it is not surprising that we will end up arguing for immigration as an economic thing, because we will be giving up our culture, we will be giving up our identity, and we will be saying what some people now do say, which is that the peoples of Britain and Europe have lost their place in the world. I think it is right for people to have a place they call home, an identity that they're proud of. I think it for all people around the world, and I think it for the people of this country. And I hope tonight you can vote to say you think that too. Thank
you. And Douglas Murray finishing off his speech to a thunderous applause there at the Oxford Union. The only thing I want to add is that Douglas was talking about that as the amount of immigration continues to grow, and the amount of immigration, whether legal or illegal, asylum seekers, refugees, migrants, whatever they are, however you want to classify them, continues to increase. He was talking about the watering down of society, especially when it comes in at such a rapid pace. But then he was saying that it's almost apologetically that some people might, the watering down of values of what it is to be British, or here what it means to be an American on our side of the pond. I don't think that should matter one bit, regardless of what happens. I think it should be even pronounced with even more fervor, with even more zeal, with more zest to talk about what it is to be British. Because the people that are coming into your country need to know that. Now, how they need to know that, that's going to come to education, that's going to come into having their place in the world, but that's not going to happen right away, but hopefully through generations, but that needs to be taught somehow. That's a conundrum. How do you get that Britishness value? How do you get that American exceptionalism, patriotism for country? How do you instill that into, the immigrants, whether they're legal or illegal? Because what we're seeing right now on both sides of the pond in many other countries, but specifically in Britain and the United States, is that there are a lot of people that have been born and raised here many, many generations, Democrats, leftists, progressives, that don't like or hate this country for what it stands for. So, if we expect immigrants, illegal or illegal or whatever classification you want to call them, to have love of country, have love of ideals, well, what can we say about our own that basically resist those ideals, resist those values? It is something to think about. Folks, we appreciate you taking the time to watch. You've been watching the Dr. Nasir Shaikh Show. I've been your host. My name is Dr. Nasir, and if you haven't done so already and you love our content, we'd love for you to subscribe to the channel. You know what to do. Hit that notification bell, like, share, and follow us. Check out our links to other videos here and below. And I'll leave you with my final thought, which is always when you're right, and when you're left, you're wrong. Until next time, folks, take care and stay safe.